Life's for living. You know, you're a long time dead. So either go big, go large, go home. Never took a dollar out, you know, for the first 15 years and just hustled really. Point by point, what was the business all about? What was the industry about? I can't think of anything worse, being around customers all day. And second, I'm pretty unpractical. I can't back a trailer. You know, I'll probably crash around buses, all that type of stuff. So I'm a great customer and I've always built the business from the point of view of what really inspires me. So had the initial payout from Intrepid, had some spare cash, bought this property. We bought it for $2.5 million. Yeah, now we're deep into this renovation journey. We're being filmed for about the last 3 years for a major TV show, which will air potentially. I never started the company with financial ambition. For me, it was really around this autonomy and accountability and feeling really passionate and feeling really engaged about something. I never really focused on a financial outcome from a personal point of view. I focused on a financial outcome and being able to grow the business and create something I was really, really proud of. But really for those first 15 years, I never touched a dollar. It always recycled back into the business. In hindsight, was that the right move?
Ten years ago, I was enjoying a fun heliboarding day. I had the good fortune to meet Ryan Sanders. I bent his ear about entrepreneurship, about the tourism business, and ultimately he decided to join the Entrepreneurs Organisation, which I've been involved with for 14 years. We've become mates over that time, and as of this filming, 2 weeks ago, he sold the remaining 40% of his company, the Haka Tourism Group, to Intrepid Travel. We go deep into navigating disasters, the earthquakes, the COVID lockdown, losing over 90% of his revenue, and then what it was like to sell a business and become part of another control organisation and structure. Autonomy is one of his values, and so it's a really interesting and deep conversation that covers that, building a large commercial property portfolio post that journey, and now he's renovating a castle of all things. This is a great conversation. I'm sure you're going to enjoy it. Ryan Sanders, Haka Tourism Group. Welcome to the show.
Great to be here, Josh.
What a pleasure.
Been looking forward to it, so keen to get into it.
Yeah, so we've known each other for just over 10 years now. And over that time, I've watched you scale a tourism empire from relatively small number to 34 million in revenue. You've started multiple brands. You've survived earthquakes and COVID bits and pieces. And now you've bought a castle. And when I was reflecting on this conversation beforehand, and you're renovating an unfinished castle, or probably building an unfinished castle, you don't do easy, do you?
No, like a good challenge. There's nothing better to, have these challenges, confront your life and, look at those obstacles and find ways to get around them. I think life's for living. You're a long time dead.
Yeah.
So either go big, go large, or go home.
Yeah.
That's my philosophy. I always love jumping in the deep end.
Yes.
I love that mix of adrenaline, that bit of fear, that bit of anxiety, but, the absolute drive to make a success of something. I really love that feeling of jumping in the deep end. And, if I look back over my life, I generally think that's how I operate. I enjoy it.
Yeah. A lot of people get paralyzed by indecision and uncertainty and the fear of the unknown, all that sort of thing. And so do you have like a innate faith that things are going to work out fine? Or do you have a methodology? Or how do you get through that?
I don't have any of those feelings about fear or anything. I mean, of course you have fear, you have healthy fear and you have healthy anxiety. But I do think I've always got complete faith that I'll be able to navigate to a successful solution. For me, if I look at a problem or a big project, I don't need a lot of detail. First of all, I've got to spend a lot of time ruminating on it. And that wouldn't be in kind of words or anything like that. That would just be a feeling. And so I'd sit there and just be still and think about something for a long, long period of time. As long as it feels right, I'm good to go. And then if I think about what the end goal, what that wants to look like, but also most importantly, what do I want it to feel like at the end of that goal? And as long as I can kind of think about 3 big milestones on that journey and they make sense to me on how I can progress, I'm kind of happy with that. And then the rest, I just fill in the blanks. So, I think I do have a fair bit of faith that I can navigate to a successful solution. Yeah. And I think those competencies, around kind of gathering information, finding solutions, influencing, communication, those competencies that are needed. And, I've just got faith I'll be able to navigate to a successful solution. I mean, don't get me wrong, at the time, sometimes when I'm in the thick of it, I'm like, what the fuck, here I am again. But I do actually thrive on that and I love it.
So what I'm hearing you say is that it's gut over head.
100%.
Yeah.
I think my gut is definitely my brain.
Right. And do you believe that you've tuned that over the course of your life? Or is it something which is like instinctively just within you and you've always learned to trust it?
I would like to sit here and say that's something that I've consciously worked on and I've developed it, but I actually think it's just part of my DNA.
Right.
I think I've always been very gut driven. I've always felt butterflies and used that as kind of an internal North Star around where to navigate myself. I think the only thing I've done differently now is just listen to it more.
Interesting.
Yeah. I find in terms of the conceptual side of things, like thinking about stuff, I think that's more of a barrier a lot of the time to doing something. I think I'm not someone that's overly analytical. I like big themes. I like big ideas. I like big step points, big journeys. But beyond that, it's not really where my playground is.
Yeah. Well, let's talk about the birth of one of those big ideas.
Yeah.
So Haka Tours, you'd come from the HR industry.
The glamorous HR industry, I tell you.
Indeed. You had zero tourism experience. So
Yeah.
what was the birthplace, the genesis of that idea for you?
So I was working for a big global bank, the Royal Bank of Scotland in Manchester. I was enjoying it. It was a great culture, had great teams. I by all accounts, I was paid well. I was good. I was getting promoted.
You were a success on the outside.
I was a success on the outside. But waking up every morning, I wasn't jumping out of bed. And it really dawned on me, like, I need full autonomy and I need full accountability. And so for me, it wasn't about, first of all, making the decision to start a tourism company. The decision, first of all, was I need my own gig. I need to be an entrepreneur. And so I started from that position where I instinctively knew that I needed my own company. And then basically I just started running through in my mind, different companies, different ideas, what would really excite me. And at that point, I'd been on my OE for about 6 or 7 years at that time. I love traveling, love snowboarding, love adventure activities, love adrenaline-based stuff. And I just kept on just going back to a tour company or a travel company. What would I create? What would I love? And essentially I stuck on a tourism business. That would be my first business.
Yeah. So you slot into the passion category, 100%. I would kind of suggest of you. And interestingly, another P word is that the first tour that you did was in a friend's borrowed Pajero.
Yeah, the actual first tour manager, Steve Latham.
Okay.
Yeah.
So how did you get out of the ground and what was that kind of early experience like in building the business from nothing with no industry experience?
It was, once again, just following my nose, gathering information, finding solutions, navigating that path. I spent probably about 6 months on a business plan, wrote this 100-page plus business plan, and it all made perfect sense how this business was going to run. And commenced that in 2006. We had a digital-first strategy from day one, which was very rare at the time, kind of coinciding with the launch of Facebook and more stuff happening on YouTube. And I supported the business remotely for the first year. So we launched in 2007, about June. Flew back to New Zealand, hired this tour manager called Steve, great guy. He really set the tone of the business and he was just the perfect partner at the start. Flew back to the UK, still worked this job at the Royal Bank of Scotland and essentially just supported the business remotely. And it wasn't until a year later they had the confidence to leave that business, relocate back to New Zealand, move back in with mum and dad, hadn't lived with them for 10 years. And just worked out of their spare room.
Love it.
And so it was really just grassroots. If I think about it, it was the ultimate case study of bootstrapping. I'd saved up £20,000 on my OE. That was the seed capital for the business and actually the only money that ever entered the company over its whole duration, apart from traditional bank lending and that sort of stuff.
And customer money, obviously.
Yeah, customer money. And we just made sure that we were profitable every year. And we were. And I just reinvested those funds back into the business, never took $1 out. For the first 15 years and just hustled really.
Yeah, wow.
Just learned point by point what was the business all about, what was the industry about. And it was just really an incremental journey. I can't say anything more. There's nothing glamorous about it. It was really just, head down, bum up, just really dedicating to it and really hustling.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so I would make what you described as the start of that business, the MVP, minimum viable proposition, is how you started.
Sure. Yeah.
Don't buy a vehicle, borrow one, don't brand it, pop it out into market through a digital first strategy.
Would have bought one if you had the money, but I tell you.
Yeah. Okay. So that MVP strategy is a great way to test an idea and test the market.
For sure.
Interestingly, you launched in the middle of the tourism year in June, which is never the best time for tourism in New Zealand.
No.
Was that conscious or? Okay, right. Didn't know that.
Well, we were actually marketing to British students, and that was their big kind of holiday. I was based in the UK, based in Manchester, so it made sense to kind of target that market and then take them my own trips on their university break during their summer.
Yeah. That MVP approach, if I can continue to use that, I would consider that to be a helpful and fundamental business discipline.
Yeah.
My sense is that you didn't necessarily maintain that as you grew the business as you started to expand out into different spaces. So at what stage, what was the next brand? Because you had Haka Tours, which was a kind of classic guided tourism business.
Great.
And that grew extensively and super well over about 10 years.
It did.
And at what stage did you look to diversify into other kind of tourism related industries?
To tell you the truth, in the first year. Because I was actually looking at all of these bills that we're paying for all these accommodation providers. And I was like, Josh, that's quite a big mortgage. Like, I could be servicing quite a good sized mortgage with what we're paying, for example, in Christchurch, Queenstown, Auckland every year. So I was looking at how much we were spending, and it just started ticking over. Maybe a vertical integration strategy with accommodation would work. And so the light bulb moment of that was pretty early. But ultimately, we weren't at that point where it was going to be, it made sense. But as soon as it started making sense around how much we're spending in each location, we started with an MVP on the accommodation side, which essentially involved buying this large 10-bedroom family home in Christchurch in the suburb of Linwood. I'd been living at home with mum and dad for the 2 years before, saved up $120,000 deposit, bought this 10-bedroom family home with the plan to convert it, and we settled on September 2nd, 2010. I moved in about 4 p.m., about 30 hours before the first Christchurch earthquake, which was an absolute disaster.
Literal.
Yeah, it was. The property sat quite low in the suburb, and so when the earthquake came at about 4 o'clock that morning on September 4th, because it sat quite low, all of the sewage systems and stuff were broken and disrepaired, and it was all coming out of our stormwater drain, everything in the kind of whole suburb, probably about 5 litres a second was probably coming out.
So raw sewage pouring into the house.
Yeah. Or mainly all of the grounds and surrounds beside it and up on the decks and up on the first floor. And so it was an absolute shit show, let's be honest. So I couldn't believe it. A 30-year-old man, I'd been living at home with mum and dad for 2 years, finally saved up this deposit. Well, I was 32 at the time, so I'd been at home for 2 years. And then, a couple of days into owning my first property, and that happened.
Wow.
Yeah.
It's funny, we had a parallel there. I went and lived with my parents when I started my first business at 30 years old as well. Yeah. And so my experience was that after about 4 or 5 months, mum comes home and she says, son, on a Friday night, can we go and make your bed? I'm like, this is a bit weird. Sure thing, mum. I'd left it unmade all week, so working all the hours that God sent. Yeah. And so mum says, it's been great having you at home, son. You've been helping out around the place and helping with the cooking and the cleaning. And, but Derek and I, we've got our own thing going on here. It's time, I think, you left. So I got turfed out of home as a 31-year-old man. I'd just turned 31, having spent a few months living at home and helping out. And they're like, it's time. You've got to leave. Time. Did you have any experience like that with your parents, or were they just kind of supportive in the background?
They were just supportive in the background.
Okay.
And so, 2 years basically stayed there until I managed to, save this deposit and buy this property. They were really good. Yeah. And so, they were understanding, for the first 5 years of my business and including all of this time, mum was always saying stuff like, are you sure you just don't want to be a teacher? You'll get a regular salary, regular income.
A teacher? Interesting default. Was she a teacher?
No, she wasn't. What? But I don't know. She thought maybe I'd be good at it.
Okay. You've got a very calming and warm presence about you, so maybe you would.
Maybe I would.
Yeah, that could be a future prospect career.
Yeah. But for her, this kind of idea of building a business from the ground up and this insecurity around, a salary, a fixed salary and how much money you're going to get was kind of something that she approached with me quite a lot. In a nice way, not in a confrontational way, but just frequently brought up, are you sure you don't want to be a teacher? Just get that salary. I'm like, no, mum, I'm pretty committed to Haka Tours right now. I'm going to make this work. Yeah. So it's interesting, different mindsets where people come from.
Yeah. So your house was full of raw sewage.
Yeah.
you were just literally at the start of, luckily you hadn't fitted it out, I guess, to be the first of the Haka
Lodges,
residences kind of approach.
Mm.
So how did you navigate your way through that process of repairing, getting it out into the market, that sort of thing?
So we were due to go through a resource consent perspective and a building upgrade before I purchased the building, and that was only going to take a couple of months. It was pretty light. Ultimately, that took a lot longer because the councils at that point weren't doing any form of consenting. It was just all hands on deck and going through repairs. So we did end up opening a year later than expected. And so that was, holding on for that year of getting no income was a bit of a challenge. But as soon as we did open, because we're based outside of the city and outside of the main CBD, we're full from day one, which is great.
Yeah. So
it really, really helped. So ultimately it was a year delay, or probably about 19 months delay.
Yeah.
But the knock-on benefit of that was it was, much more profitable and beneficial than what I thought it would be based on my forecasting because of where we were located outside of the city and, one of the few hostels that was still kind of operating and open, which was great. And then from that point, we moved into Queenstown and then just started ticking along the journey of where we went with our tours. Where could we send the most amount of people and where we could vertically integrate, which was awesome.
Yeah, makes sense.
Yeah.
And so the second earthquake, did that affect you?
Yeah, definitely. Right. So I was in the city at the time, top of Cashel Street Mall, just about to walk to a meeting, and that was just carnage, absolute carnage. Yeah. We had some damage in the second earthquake, but it wasn't significant. I think there's probably $30,000-$40,000 worth of damage,
right,
which is all insurable.
Yeah.
So very lucky compared to what happened to a lot of people and a lot of people that lost their life.
You went yellow sticker or red sticker, obviously.
No, thank God.
Yeah. Okay.
Brutal time.
Yeah, very brutal.
Yeah.
And so in terms of the growth path that you went on as a business, I knew you based on the research getting to 34, give or take, million of revenue, which is a substantial tourism empire. What were some of the key kind of inflection and step points that you had revenue and growth-wise?
The kind of key steps for us was on the touring side. And I didn't know this about tourism, but ultimately I thought every company ran their own tours. I thought if you bought a G Adventures tour, that G Adventures all across the world were running that trip. And because I had never worked in tourism before and I didn't know a lot of how the kind of supply chain worked, I didn't actually realize that a lot of these big global brands actually use something called an inbound tour operator. So someone that's got all the existing network, all the existing infrastructure, and they ran these tours as a white label service for these big global brands. So I think with Haka, for the first 3 or 4 years, we ran all of our own trips. And throughout our whole journey, we've always run our own trips. But actually 3 or 4 years in, we're getting great customer feedback, really great profile online. And we started getting shoulder tapped by these big global companies wanting us to run their tours in New Zealand. And so that was a huge kind of revenue kind of milestone for us. I didn't even know that existed. That's how green I was. And so, I was really surprised when they came through. I thought it was really unusual.
Yes.
But I realized that was a big part of the industry. So we really approached that market pretty hard. We incorporated snow tours over winter, which ultimately meant that we had a year-round product range. The benefits being is that we could buy a lot of our own buses because the utilization was across 12 months. We could put tour guides on permanent all year-round contracts, which was really, really important and still quite unusual to this day. Because ultimately the tour guides are really the face of the business and they deliver on all your brand promise. But when you're having to re-recruit every single year and actually induct them and then train them on who you are and your values, there's quite a bit of risk there. So from very early on, the second year in the business, we went for this kind of permanent tour guide strategy and then investing all of our own buses and infrastructure. And ultimately what it meant was our customer service delivery was exceptional. We're getting great customer feedback. Word of mouth is really spreading. And because we're investing in our own infrastructure, our own buses, when we could quote for a lot of this kind of big international work, our pricing strategy was actually a lot more effective because we owned the buses as opposed to dry hire costs and all that type of stuff. So we actually could undercut a fair bit of the market. And ultimately, those two things really did help us, kind of snowball and incrementally year after year have some quite significant growth. And that was really just on the touring side.
Yes. And so capital intensive business.
Very capital intensive.
And yet you didn't raise any money other than bank debt funding.
Yeah, and that was very limited. It was just that original £20,000 into the business. And then apart from that, I don't even think we had any debt. I would have had some credit card debt, just normal stuff, and the tour guides are on trips. I think we wouldn't have got more than, say, $50,000 worth of debt at that point,
Mm.
really for the first 10 years.
Is that common across the industry, being capital intensive and buying the equipment?
No, I would say no. No, I'd say most people would probably go for a long-term lease or a bit of a blended strategy. But for us at the start, it's very much owning all of the stuff that we could get.
Yes. Okay.
So it was capital intensive.
Yeah.
I was pulling, I paid myself kind of $40,000 a year, not taking any money from the business. Obviously, expenses would be quite extensive through the business. So,
well, you love to travel, so it probably wasn't, considered a luxury anyway.
Yeah, no. And I just really just hustled.
Yeah.
I never started the company with financial ambition. For me, it was really around this autonomy and accountability and feeling really passionate and feeling really engaged about something. I never really focused on a financial outcome from a personal point of view.
Yeah.
I focused on a financial outcome and be able to grow the business and create something I was really, really proud of. But really for those first 15 years, I never touched a dollar. It always recycled back into the business. In hindsight, was that the right move? No.
Go on.
But it felt completely right at the time, and I wanted to build something I was really proud of.
So looking back now, if that wasn't the right move, what would have been?
Definitely de-risking a bit, taking some lifestyle chips off the table, making sure that my kind of personal financial well-being was being looked after. And also being the only shareholder in all of my companies for the first kind of, up until just, COVID time. I could have brought on a capital partner really.
Yeah.
We had a strong growth journey to talk about. But I definitely think there was maybe a bit of ego in that. When I started the company, it was really important to me to never take a dollar from anybody, not from friends and family, not from my parents, not from anyone. I really wanted to do it on my own 2 feet.
Yes.
And that was really important to me. Looking back in hindsight, I don't resonate with that as much now. I don't know why, but it really was really important.
Yeah.
And I just really wanted to see how far I could take the business on my own 2 feet with no one else having any input.
And so the alternative path would have been debt funding or selling down some equity along the way, maybe bringing in some PE kind of partnership. Those would be the top 3 that would pop into my mind.
Definitely.
Yeah. And consequently, you would have been able to take more off the table and purchase, life or lifestyle assets or, property for yourself or whatever it might have been.
100%.
Yeah, that's kind of thinking. Yeah.
Yeah, but ultimately, autonomy is a huge part and one of my personal values. And I think running the company, one of the things that why I wanted to do it by myself was that autonomy play. And that's why I left the bank job.
Right.
I just think having that absolute freedom to follow your path and your decisions and what you're doing and live and die by the sword, that's really important to me as well.
Yes.
And even particularly with my staff, give them a huge amount of autonomy, but you're totally accountable for the decisions that you're making.
Yeah.
And you've got to completely own those. And I love that from my point of view as well. And I think bringing on a second party, I don't really want to water down or distill that kind of energy. I love the idea of living and dying by the sword. I think that's so cool.
Yeah.
The decisions you make are so important.
Yes.
And because all relying on you to deliver. And I love that.
We're of a certain demographic, the same, Gen Xers. And so the thing that I relate to with other people of my age is that we were brought up in an environment which was quite laissez-faire. Yeah. Latchkey kids, I think they called us. So let yourself in after school, make yourself a sandwich, do the chores around the house. And this is when you're 7 years old kind of thing.
For sure.
I anticipate your upbringing was not dissimilar to mine. A lot of my mates are the same.
Yeah.
And so we learned at a relatively young age the consequences of making our own decisions and getting things right or wrong. And so the accountability, autonomy thing sits well with people of our age.
Yeah.
How well do you think that's translated to the Gen Ys and the Gen Zers that no doubt make up a chunk of your workforce?
Yeah, it's a difficult one. I would say materially less, for sure. I've always prided ourselves on a company like hiring the right people with the right values. A lot of our roles, you don't need to have a lot of existing competency. So really getting the right people with the right drive and ambition and the right value orientation is the most important thing. You can train for everything else, but ultimately believing that people thrive under autonomy. And so I'm the opposite of a micromanager. Yeah. I love setting people up for success, defining what success looks like, and then my job is just to remove roadblocks and let them go. Yeah. But I have found over time, from 2007 when we started the business and I started hiring people right up till now, I think particularly with the younger generation, they do need a little bit more kind of
guardrails,
scope, management, which, look, there's positives and negatives, but it's not my natural default setting. Yeah. I like to be left alone. And I like staff that like to be left alone as well.
Yes. Yeah, I understand that. We tend to hire on our image, and that will work for a certain period of time for some organisations.
Yeah.
Now, you talk quite openly about working with the scaling up system.
Scaling up gazelles,
So what are the key facets of the scaling up system that you have wholeheartedly kind of bought into and believe in?
I love the scaling up system. That's been a real game changer for us and our coach, Adrian Pickstock. So I think for me, I think a lot of those aspects of scaling up were innate to me. But the biggest benefit that I felt was I had quite a big leadership team from probably 2014, 2015, taking them on the journey, on this growth journey, and really using it as a time to really get alignment, getting their passion, getting their input, and super blue sky with the BHAG. And I've never been personally afraid for a big, strong BHAG, but getting all of their input and setting that BHAG, setting up our 3HAG, our 1HAG, which is the 3-year goals, 1-year goals, all of our key milestones along that journey. I love that stuff. And it was mainly for me time just to get alignment and get all of them brought in. So that was the biggest benefit. As I said before, I instinctively were aligned with a core values approach or a values approach to business, a business purpose-driven approach, and this kind of blue sky thinking. But being able to take people on the structured journey was very, very cool for us. And it was really monumental. I mean, we pushed really hard 8 years with the Gazelle Scaling Up framework. And looking back in hindsight, whilst we did a lot of cool stuff around product and vertical integration, all that stuff that we did, Gazelles, from our point of view, 100% was probably one of the top 3 success mechanisms, for us. 100%. Absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I love it. The clarity of objectives, so getting people crystal clear and focused on what it is that the business is trying to achieve, firstly, and then secondly, alignment is kind of what I'd take away from that, which I love both of those things.
Yeah.
You hired a wonderful general manager in Eve Lawrence.
Yes.
Very mature thing to do. At what stage do you hire Eve, and how did you set her up for success?
So she was actually our 3rd general manager. So, I've never created the business to be a tour guide. So when we started a tour company, and still people think this is baffling, I started a tour company. I've never actually run a tour.
You've never run a tour? Wow.
Never. I can't think of anything worse, being around customers all day. And second, I'm pretty unpractical. I can't back a trailer. I'll probably crash around buses, all that type of stuff. So I'm a great customer. And I've always built the business from the point of view of what really inspires me. And I still do that now with my other businesses. And so as long as it gets me excited, I know that I'm representative enough of the market for it to really kind of stick and really hit. So I've got to make sure I always keep true to that North Star. And then the same with actually along that journey. Like I've never kind of called myself the CEO. I've never wanted to be just the primary leader of the business. If anything, I'd love to be, I want a strong CEO to steady the ship, and I want to be buzzing around in a helicopter out in front. I don't necessarily want to be that person in the businesses that I've led up until this point, like these fast growth businesses. And so Eve was our 3rd general manager. We had 2 before that. We got our first general manager around probably 2016, 2017. And that was because ultimately at that point we had 3 core businesses. It was the touring business, it was the accommodation business, and it was the educational business. They all formed part of Haka Tourism Group. And ultimately we had a GM in each of those businesses that were leading each of those brands. My job was to sit above, leverage our shared service team, which is our digital marketing team, which sat in-house, our finance team, everything else like that, and work with each of the general managers on their verticals. And that really worked well for us. And so, we probably got a general manager, as I said, from 2015 onwards, and Eve was hired in 2020. And she was incredible.
The first 2 that you had, was it a fit issue that meant that they didn't stick around as long as potentially that role could or should have?
Yeah, one was a fit issue, and one was a family kind of work-life balance issue, and wanting to return back to Queenstown.
Yeah.
I think it's very hard being an entrepreneur and the person that always, people turn to and look to try and replicate in some degree who you are and what value you provide to all of your team and all of your staff. So, it is a difficult transition. Yeah. I think we've done pretty well with regards to it, but, Eve was a terrific fit. Yes. She had that entrepreneurial mindset, very passionate, very upfront, very clear communicator, happy to operate within chaos, which was so perfect as kind of COVID came around.
Yes.
I've said to Eve, part of my feedback to her, when I've kind of reflected on the moment and her subsequently leaving the business, was her ability to deal with uncertainty was exactly what we needed over that time. And for me, that's a really terrific quality, and one that I really admire in the leaders that I hire within the business, because you can't always have the most well thought out plan. You can't always have these really clear, specific goals and actually achieve all of them in sequence. You've got to be able to operate with a level of uncertainty, and particularly having an entrepreneur as the kind of North Star of the business. We're magpies. We're always looking at different shiny things and changing tact and all that sort of stuff. So for me, having people that can navigate with an uncertainty are really valuable, and Eve was that.
Thanks for listening, and apologies for the interruption. I wanted to share with you that this show is one that we, the team, collectively pour a lot of effort into. There's resources that are involved. We have producers, promoters, and wonderful guests that share their time with us so that you may learn and possibly, hopefully, make some impact on the world as a result of that learning. The only thing I ask of you is go and check out my website. There's a diagnostic tool on there. There's a free downloadable chapter of my upcoming book, remarkably called 2 Commas. And there is some other fascinating resources that I'm not going to tell you about because you need to go to the website to check them out. So thanks for listening, and please continue enjoying the show. So business was running super well. You'd diversified. You bought some more assets. You built the residence on K Road as well. I think that was your biggest accommodation.
That was a big 4-star property.
Yep. And then COVID kicked in. 90+% drop in revenue essentially overnight.
Definitely.
What did you do?
We had to move quick. And, I had to, make 200 staff redundant, which was a bit of a nightmare. And that was all via video call, which is terrible. Yeah, so just over 200, I think. And obviously just resort back to a really key skeleton staff. I wanted to make sure that we had enough staff to kind of keep the DNA of the business alive, keep that intellectual capital. So we'll probably hold on to a few more staff than maybe other businesses have might, but I knew I had absolute faith that we're going to navigate through this. So once we'd made the additional, all of those kind of cuttings to staff, and as I say, 200 is a big number. That's a lot of calls to have over Zoom. The second thing was a lot of our liabilities. So we had 8 commercial properties at that point. We only owned a couple, and 6 we kind of long-term leased. So our rent roll at that time, including our office and everything else, was about $330,000 per month.
Wow.
So $330,000 per month. That's a lot of money that comes off every month. It's a lot of fixed cost. And when I look back in hindsight, my appetite for risk and signing up to leases and complete faith that we can deliver on was just, unchecked. But when something like a global pandemic comes, that's very humbling. And so negotiating with the landlords, we exited from 3 properties, one that we owned in Christchurch, sold it for a steal, which is the first property we ever bought in 2010. And then 2 big leases in Auckland we sold for probably, pennies on the dollar. But ultimately, whilst we made a loss on those properties, getting rid of that liability was the real win. And so really my job over that first year was really to reduce our liability to as low it could be, and then absolutely hustling to find any form of revenue that the business could service. Because ultimately, 95% of our market's always been international. We don't market to Kiwis. Going on a guided tour of the country, a lot of Kiwis would be like, no, I can navigate through my own country. So we've always just marketed Australia, Canada, US, mainland Europe, Germany. Same on the accommodation side. These are kind of high-end hostel spaces with communal kitchens, all that type of stuff. It's not really conducive to kind of Kiwis traveling. If you're going away for a weekend with your friends or whatever, you generally splash out a little bit more. So a huge part of our clientele is international. So essentially we had no market. So we went from $34 million revenue in FY20 to, I think, just over $1 million the following year, which is absolutely brutal. Brutal. And that was for 2 years straight.
So did you manage to get, was that Kiwis that you were putting through the business just to keep the lights on?
No, that was a few contracts. We got one with Auckland City Mission looking after the homeless, and we put them in our K Road property. And the second and third was the MIQ contracts. So I was calling up the people that were managing the MIQ contracts, on the weekly. But because we didn't have in-house, commercial cooking facilities to do all the food servicing and stuff, they came and surveyed our 2 Auckland properties and they weren't suitable for MIQ. Which I was gutted about because actually they were really good earners. But I kept in touch with the woman, made her, a friend. I was just kept on peppering her, and she called me up one day on like a Thursday night and was going, "Ryan, I've stuffed up. We've actually got 100 people that are coming in tomorrow night. Haven't got any beds for them. Can you turn around those 2 assets and get them ready for tomorrow morning? And we'll contract them for 12 weeks each." I said yes straight away. Got the contract in the next day, signed it up. It was really beneficial to who we were as a business. Like, it was an absolute game changer.
It's a lifeline, right?
It was an absolute lifeline. And we had these 2, 12-month MIQ contracts, which absolutely helped. That was incredible. And then, look, a lot of the small subsidies and stuff getting from the government and everything like that. But it was absolutely brutal. When I look back on it, actually one of the biggest things I'm most proud of is that hustle over COVID. It was no mean feat getting rid of 3 commercial properties, getting these small contracts. That took an absolute huge amount of kind of time and energy to put them together. And coming out of that the other end and capitalising on the upswing of tourism, I'm really proud of.
Yeah, well done. It looked for a period of time, and there were other operators that were going under around you. It looked for a period of time, I think, and we spoke about this, that you were kind of like, I'm not sure how the future's going to look for us.
It was a 50-50 whether we were going to make it through.
Yeah. And so given that you'd ploughed every cent of yours back into the business, did you question that decision along the way there?
100%.
Yeah, wow.
That was, hindsight's a beautiful thing, Josh. I definitely should have de-risked a bit more.
Yeah.
We had a big BHAG to be $100 million business, and we'd kind of plotted that out up until 2028. That's the time frame that we're working towards. It all made perfect sense. We're tracking ahead of target. Up to FY20, we had a whole bunch of commercial property that we're going to be either leasing or purchasing. We had a whole bunch of big contracts on the go on the touring side, so everything was looking good. And at that 100 million point, that's when I was wanting to get on a capital partner. And but that didn't eventuate. What did happen though was I talked before about being totally unaware that the big global brands would kind of use companies like us that had quite a tight ecosystem within New Zealand to run their trips. In about 2016-17, we won a contract with Intrepid to run their tours for them, or a select number of their tours, which we did. And we're getting terrific feedback running all these Intrepid trips. It was a slightly more higher-end product, so the tour managers used to love running those trips because it was a nicer bus and nicer accommodation and all that type of stuff.
Nicer people, maybe.
Yeah, well, it's debatable.
Different, yeah.
And we've done a really good job. And one of the things that I've always been very laser focused on from 2007 is our service delivery. Our customer feedback, both online and everything that we get direct to the consumer, like really making sure we're doing the best that we ultimately do. We're doing a terrific job with Intrepid. And so when COVID came, they were, one of the trends was people travelling closer to home. And so they knew that actually when we came out of COVID, actually New Zealand potentially would be quite a big hotspot for them. So we brokered a deal where they acquired 60% of Haka Tours. They were one of our biggest contracts, so they were quite a big revenue generator for us, probably 3 or 4%, but, still quite big. And they bought 60% of the business in 2021, which is also, a great deal across the line. It was priced up based on FY20, which is great.
That was my question. So we went into lockdown on March 24th. So there was only a week of kind of, doors closed.
100%.
So that's a really kind of, it's almost a kind thing for them to do.
It was really kind.
Yeah.
When I look back on it, like the impacts of COVID were felt from kind of January onwards. So we did lock the doors in March, but actually the booking window, January, February, March was really limited. So we weren't getting a lot of bookings. So there was probably a bit more of a material impact than just when the borders closed on March 24th. So the financials weren't as strong as that they would have been. We brokered a deal where they bought 60%. Initially, it was going to be for 4.5 times EBITDA. Because I had this separate accommodation strategy going on and I couldn't commit at that point to moving full-time into the business with Haka Tours, that got dropped to a 3.5 times multiple. But with the remaining 40% purchased at the end of 2024 at a 4.5 times multiple.
Okay.
So we kind of negotiated on that point. And with one of the main caveats being was, all of our products would be going to the Intrepid website. They're a huge kind of sales generator. So there was a material impact in terms of bookings that we're generating through their platforms as well. So ultimately, it worked out really, really well.
So when you did the deal in 2021, you signed it for that 3-year out as well. So you had the terms agreed for the end of 24.
We
okay.
did.
Yeah, great.
Yeah.
And I guess at that stage, there was no visibility. Of course, there wasn't in terms of when we'd open up properly and when tourism would come back online and what your profitability would end up being.
Totally.
So a bit of a leap of faith again as well.
Big leap of faith. Like if I look back in hindsight, I don't know if you do that in these types of contracts, but if there could have been some kind of force majeure like clause in there where, because at that point I was also worried about a war breaking out and all this other stuff and all this, another pandemic. And so it was a really nerve-wracking year, 2024.
Okay.
So ultimately it was a successful exit and I was happy with the outcome. But probably my key takeaways and learnings from that was we structured the deal that we would operate as Haka Tours all the way through to full exit. And at that point of full exit, they would, rebrand as Intrepid a bit later on, and then they'd incorporate all their own systems and policies and people. But that never really works out that way because ultimately what happened was there was a whole bunch of creep in terms of software upgrades and putting in their systems and their policies. So what it meant was the business did change to a fair bit degree on how we operated with Haka Tours, and it blended really into the Intrepid model. And that Intrepid model, it ultimately had some more additional cost. Everything around their B Corp certifications, and they've got great people approach around how they treat like maternity leave, and it goes well above and beyond. All great stuff, which I love. Goes far above and beyond, which is the minimum requirements. Volunteering, living wage, all of that type of stuff. So all of that creeps into the business, which is totally fine. I think it's great stuff. But when I'm working on a multiple and an earn-out, those are some of the things that we had to have some negotiations on a bit later on.
Yes.
But I think in hindsight, I probably should have thought through that in a bit more detail and clearly documented, what the state of the business was in terms of software that supported the business, what our policies were and everything like that. And that would be a bit of an appendix for us to work from. So any material deviation from that, when we're talking through normalizations and how we're going to reach our final figure, that was kind of predefined. So I wish I'd predefined some of those in a bit more detail.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah.
It was your first M&A deal to be involved in, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so it represents to me a strategic partner that you had out in the marketplace that had been in place for 5 years by the time the deal was done.
Correct.
So they had good visibility of your business. There was an overlap and a symbiotic relationship that existed between the two of you. Yeah. And so I guess the DD process was relatively quick. There was a lot of good faith that went into that. Am I right on that front?
Yeah, there was a lot of good faith. I mean, there was DD. In hindsight, probably, I don't know if it was light or not. I think it was, it was a good level of DD. Like we went through the last 3 years financials and a fair bit of detail and, really workshopped our, key contracts and where we're going from. So there was good faith in the sense that they knew that we're a good operator, but they definitely did their own due diligence. But I couldn't have been prouder to work with a company like Intrepid. If I could have gone back to 2006 and 2007, and for that to be our exit, I would have just been completely over the moon. I mean, they're an amazing business. And I'm not just saying that because they bought us, but they really do optimize a company that balances, the planet, people, and profit. They really honor that B Corp ethos, and they do tremendous things, right across the world. So I am really humbled to think we've played a small part in their success. We're their New Zealand business, and it's very cool.
Values alignment quite clearly with the business. You mentioned before one of your key values is autonomy.
For sure.
And so you went from being 100% shareholder, having an executive team in place, to being a part of a bigger group.
Yeah.
So what was that like for Ryan to move from being essentially technically able to call all the shots to being part of a bigger group?
It's a challenge. So that wasn't my day-to-day role. I was 100% sitting on the accommodation side, but I sat on the board. And it's a difficult one because ultimately, when you're used to being the, ultimately making the decision, get everyone's feedback, but ultimately you're the person making the decision, versus having to use your communication skills to influence and spend all that time and energy to try and get people to your way of thinking at a board level. It can be frustrating at times. Don't get me wrong, it was a really great board and the people on the board are terrific. And absolutely love Intrepid. But yeah, I much prefer having that complete autonomy. I say that's where I get excited.
Yeah.
So it was a learning curve and it was a transition. And I think part of being involved in entrepreneurs organisation, which we're both involved in, using my forum group to really talk through some of those challenges and, get that experience share was just super helpful. But ultimately, you've got to reach a point where you've got to give up that level of control and you've just got to emotionalise it and really understand it. You've got to understand what's the bits that you really want to fight on and the bits that you've got to give up. And because you can't have a fight about everything. And when I mean a fight, I mean a healthy discussion.
Yeah. It takes energy and it takes time to get involved in that.
Yeah, so be very selective around what's important to you.
Yes.
Because otherwise,
That's a pick your battles conversation, which the same is true of any relationship, be it a sibling, parent, a significant other in a spousal relationship.
Yeah.
You mentioned that you needed to develop more influence skills, and I subscribe to the school of thinking that influence, leadership is really just influence at its very core. Do you think you've evolved as a leader as a consequence of going through the partial sale?
Definitely.
Becoming part of a board? Yeah.
Oh, look, it's so important to look at other people's viewpoints and stuff and where people perceive risk and everything else. So I think it was part of the natural journey of going on all of that. I think it's great to get exposure to it.
Yes.
And, if anything, it just happened five years too early for my view.
Yes. Okay. And so you then went through the full exit, the remaining 40% in 2024.
Yeah.
Was that the time that you set up Drifter, the PE play?
No. So the exit was based on FY24 financials, which is a calendar year for Intrepid. And we actually just settled officially 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, wow. Okay.
Yeah, so Drifter and what we've done, the accommodation stuff, that was interesting. That was I got an email via LinkedIn from a guy that worked for Goldman Sachs, and he has a real estate capital guy. And he expressed interest in the hostel space. And he's spoken to a whole bunch of people in Australia and New Zealand, asked me about hostel space and who he should speak to. And he said it all started pointing back to me. And we basically met via LinkedIn, and then we met via Zoom and just had a whole bunch of exploratory conversations around what a world would look like post-COVID, and a business that we could put together that capitalised on what we saw was going to be an aggressive return of tourism, but also capturing some of the opportunity that was available at the time around some of the properties that were available for sale, and the fact that the chessboard had essentially been wiped clean, and it was a moment in time where you could capture some significant assets for a good price.
Yeah.
So we essentially went through a capital raising strategy. Initially, we were going to raise funds through a new bank in Australia, Barrenjoey.
Okay.
But ultimately ended up doing 2 deals, one with KKR in Australia and a separate one with Gore for a New Zealand platform.
They're both private equity firms?
Yeah. So ultimately, I was the operations guy. I was delivering on the authenticity of being able to deliver on this brand promise of these high-end hostels. And ultimately, Hugh and his partner Josh, who's got a digital marketing background. Hugh was the deals and the capital structure guy. So ultimately, we're fulfilling 3 different roles.
Yes.
One was the operational delivery. Josh was around brand and marketing, and Hugh was around capital. And we, essentially knocked on a whole bunch of doors, pitched this idea of Drifter, which is essentially a lifestyle hybrid hotel, which was the best of the community and, cohesive kind of meeting people kind of idea of a really well-performing hostel, but with some of the amenity and additional kind of quality of a hotel. So really blending the two.
Yes.
So the idea of a hybrid hotel, which has been done successfully overseas, but there's really been no significant platforms within Australasia that have been developed.
Okay.
And we really wanted to kind of own that space.
And so the play was to buy existing assets that were undervalued or distressed,
Correct.
and then bring them through a rebranding process into the Drifter brand and way of operating and doing business.
100%.
You've got a strong capital brain in behind the scenes. You've got yourself who understands how to operate and build those types of assets. And then, of course, someone who knows how to fight and win in the digital sphere for customers. So that sounds like a powerful team to have in place.
Because it's a real estate fund, and also with the two kind of parties that we've had, it's a significant amount of capital. Ultimately, because these are real estate plays, stapled entities, PropCo and OpCo together, we're kind of generating outsized returns with these OpCos, these high density kind of accommodation plays. Some of them integrated with F&B, but ultimately having them, can kind of combine together with management companies sitting on top. But some quite significant sums. But ultimately, because there's some really quality real estate both across New Zealand and Australia.
And how many assets have you bought so far?
So my day-to-day role is on the New Zealand strategy, which is the Haka House brand. And then ultimately Haka House is a really Haka Lodges 2.0. So prior to COVID, we had these 8 Haka properties, sold 3. So we had an existing portfolio of 5. The Youth Hosting Association, they've been involved in New Zealand for about 100 years. Unfortunately, during COVID, did not make it through. So we bought their 9 assets through a partnership with Gore, and went through a rebrand to Haka House. And so now we've got 14 assets across New Zealand on the Haka House side, and then a similar side on the separate deal that was done with KKR, with Drifter, and a platform that we bought called The Village, with those getting primarily rebranded to Little Drifter. So it's Drifter is the big kind of key kind of flagship properties, and Little Drifter the smaller, more regional assets.
And so at what stage did you entertain the notion of starting to buy an unfinished castle? Tell us about that journey.
Yeah, that journey's been an interesting one. So my husband and I, Marco, we both love winter, so we both love skiing. We've been looking for a property in and around Wanaka for probably about 7 or 8 years now. I never found anything that we really liked. So started looking a bit more further afield, until one day Eve, so our general manager on the Haka Tours front, sent me a link to this property in Clyde and said, hey, this would be great for your accommodation strategy. I remember looking at it, forwarding it to my husband Marco, and said, stuff that. This is what we've been looking for.
This is us.
This is us. And so ultimately it's a property that was built in 1920. It's been called by the locals Earnscleugh Castle for the last 100 years, but ultimately it's not a castle. It's a big manor home that's never been finished. Marco and I are here to complete the job over 100 years later. So it's on 30 acres. It's got 3 buildings on the property. The main castle building, which is, as I say, it was a big 10-bedroom property over 2 floors with the ballroom and multiple lounges and dining rooms and all that great stuff. And then a separate coach house, which is a 3-bedroom, single-story property, which is built for the grandfather that needed round-the-clock care and nurses living on site, but ultimately turned into the singlemen's quarters. And then a 3rd building, which is the stables, which we're going to turn into an art gallery and an apartment up above.
Beautiful.
So 3 separate buildings. That came about 3 years ago. So had the initial payout from Intrepid, had some spare cash, bought this property. It was, we bought it for $2.5 million, and now we're deep into this renovation journey. We're being filmed for about the last 3 years for a major TV show, which will air potentially either end of this year or March 2026.
When do you anticipate kind of moving in?
Moving in probably, I think it'll be ready to move in by the end of the year. So the plan is to have Christmas, family Christmas down there this year. So it'll be 3 months into 3 years into the renovation. And I tell you, that's been one hell of a journey. It's a protected property, so heritage listed, Heritage 1, and wow, it's been a journey, I tell you. Drawing back to how we started the conversation about jumping headfirst in, I've got a newfound respect for the husband. I thought he was kind of the sane, risk-averse one, but I tell you, he's not. He's not. He loves risk as much as I do.
Yes.
So, it's been once again, I think it's a really beautiful thing, as a couple. This is the first time we've been together 14 years. I think it's very unfortunate if you don't go through something that either really challenges you personally or challenges you and challenges you together as a couple, I think is a really great opportunity.
Yeah.
I know you can look at it in a really negative way and think, wow, there's a lot of pain, there's a lot of frustration, there's a lot of anxiety, there's a lot of negative emotion attached to it. But that's actually also a really beautiful thing as well, to be able to navigate through all of that as a couple and hopefully come out the other side.
Yeah.
And so I think being challenged is actually a great thing.
I agree. So I understand that you and Marco together don't have any children. He does from a prior relationship.
Yeah, we do.
Yes.
So one stepdaughter on my side, but his daughter.
Yes.
Yeah.
And so the not raising kids thing together, my wife Tina and I, we made the decision to not do that, having gotten together a little bit later in life.
Yeah.
And so I've been in behind the scenes helping her out with her business and have a minority equity stake in that to provide some funding and some growth and some other bits and pieces.
Yeah.
And so it's been not always easy because you've got to get that alignment thing and, consistently going about understanding expectations and then knowing what shooting for the stars is and what the consequence of achieving that is.
For sure.
And so I agree with you that having like a shared thing that you do together, if you don't have the children to raise, I think is actually a really important thing.
Definitely.
Because it's more than just an interest.
Yeah.
It's more than, going for a hike or doing some travel or, doing some art things together, which is all the other things that Tina and I do. But it's more about kind of going, what's something that we can work on together? What's something we can roll our sleeves up, particularly in her case, and do something together. So I'm guessing you're having the same experience.
Yeah, 100%. I actually never thought about it in that context, but you're totally right.
Mm.
I think by default, you're right. A lot of couples get that through raising kids, regardless. But when you haven't got that,
yes,
you're totally right. I never thought about that. Great.
Yeah, there we go.
It's a great way to think about it.
So 47 years young, give or take. So plenty of gas left in the tank.
Oh, I don't know about that.
Yeah. I've always said that if the right thing comes along, then I may get involved in another startup venture. But that right thing hasn't presented itself to me as yet. And so I continue happily along my path. But do you have a sense as to what the next 2, 3, 4 years might play out for you like?
No, I just think, if I think about what I want to get involved in next, and this is after Haka and everything involved in tourism. I'm not someone that's tied to tourism. I started tourism because it's what got me most excited at that point in time. Maybe in 5 years' time, I'm quite interested in thinking about, the health sector. It's something personally that I'd love to kind of dive deep into. And whether we utilise our property down south Earnscliffe for that, I'm not too sure. But I am open to, thinking about other businesses outside of the pure tourism scope. And, if I think about where I position myself, I'm sure you have read it as well, the E-Myth, Ronald E. Gerber. I've never really thought about myself in that technician phase. I really don't need to be in-depthly hands-on with that business in terms of the actual delivery. I definitely think about things from an entrepreneurial mindset. So, I'd love to kind of be exposed to other industries above and beyond tourism. But who knows what that looks like.
The investment landscape is fascinating, and you've cut your teeth in what is considered to be, the biggest and grandest investment class at the moment in real estate. And so I've really enjoyed the journey that I've been through investing in a variety of different asset classes. There's so many, if you unpack it. I have a masterclass around teaching people about the different opportunities that exist because people tend to focus on the things that they're aware of.
Sure.
Property always features highly on people's list, and they might go into, crypto, obviously equities people always have, but then you've got these alternate classes. You can invest in alcohol. So whiskey and wine is a massive investment class. Obviously fine art is one. Cigars you can invest in, interestingly, and you can do fractional ownership across all of these things.
Sure.
I bring that stuff up not because I'm encouraging you to start smoking or drinking but more about kind of going, the consequence of me picking up on these alternative asset classes is that I've gone through a journey of learning and understanding, and it's become a way to immerse myself in things that I didn't know about beforehand and meet some of the characters and players that sit there. But being a SaaS guy, being a tech kind of guy for 25 years, you can end up meeting and socializing and working with a similar kind of archetype of people.
Yeah.
And so branching out has given me this kind of world of understanding, especially, Web3 when that came along, and
Sure.
16, 17 when there was the crypto boom, and the kind of people and the hope and the interest and the passion, and then I didn't get involved in the alt classes there, the JPEG type art, as I like to call it.
NFTs.
Yeah, NFTs. I didn't buy any of those, but it's been a really exploratory, interesting journey for me.
I'm deep into crypto.
Got it.
I'm deep.
Do you have a particular favorite coin that you're in, or is it the infrastructure?
Do you know what? I've gone heavy into the altcoins. I wish at the start of the cycle I'd just gone heavy Bitcoin.
Yeah.
I do own a few Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's definitely outperformed in terms of the cycle so far. And I've gone pretty hard on a lot of the layer ones, a lot of infrastructure plays, a lot of AI, some gaming. But man, that's been a journey.
Yeah.
And ultimately, I started investing in crypto because ultimately the renovation in Enschede was going, well, I can't say too much, but I quickly needed some more capital.
Right. So you traded to make some money.
Yeah, I was probably spending 3 hours a day, 3 hours a night kind of researching crypto. And I probably have now for the last kind of 2 or 3 years. So it's become more of a hobby. I've got significant capital locked up, so I guess it's more of a hobby because there's a big financial kind of commitment there. But I love it. I do think it's going to be a game changer for the world. I think we are in a funny period where it's not really obvious to the kind of retail participant or end user and how that application is going to look in the real world. But the blockchain's not going anywhere. I think it's going to be, it's going to be a daily part of our lives pretty quickly.
Yeah.
And it's not going away.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
So in the alternate universe, there's another Ryan Sanders, and so he's found a career which is not the HR professional, moved into tourism, moved into investment and managing big assets, but it makes him deeply happy. What was that career path?
I think if I hadn't have gone down the path, so I studied industrial psych postgrad at university, so I really love kind of, and once again, when I was at university, I had no strategy. I was just doing courses that I loved. I didn't even realize I was double majoring until the last 6 months of my Bachelor of Science, and everyone was wondering why my course load was so full on. I didn't even know I was double majoring because I was just following these courses and stuff. So I loved industrial psych, did that postgrad, but it wasn't too fun to kind of employ in a corporate day-to-day life. If I could think about a different career path, I think I should have probably done commerce and got involved in the M&A side.
Right.
I think I'd have loved that.
Yes.
And I think getting under the hood of businesses and really understanding how they tick and how they operate, and doing deals, that would have been me to a T.
I mean, watch the space, time, resources on your side. And so that's certainly something that could play out.
Definitely.
There's a play that's going on at the moment that people are talking about in New Zealand, but I've not seen anyone doing it at scale yet, which is finding legacy assets, your plumbers, your flooring manufacturer, your, pharmacy, for example, and then buying those assets from retiring baby boomers and then bringing an automation lens to it. So bringing in modern technology to the asset. And so I think it's an interesting play for folk that are experienced operators that know how to spot an opportunity and then kind of not extract the value, but drive value into that thing and then turn it into something that becomes a more profitable kind of asset. I'm really interested in how that space is going to play out over the next couple of years.
Yeah, 100%. And I can see how that'll work, like putting together all of these kind of mum-dad operators and ultimately linking them up with a very strong kind of backbone of tech and platform and synchronicity. Ultimately, that's what we've done with the hostel space, because the hostel space is very fragmented, a lot of single-site operators or people who own two. So there really wasn't any other platforms apart from, YJ. There was Base Backpackers and Juicy had a few, but ultimately it's around consolidating that play. But I think that's a really interesting concept. On the accommodation side also, there's been, particularly overseas, a real push to all of these kind of old school motels, with a pool in the middle and, 1 or 2 stories, very outdated and kind of these crazy locations. There's been a big push to kind of renovate those and give them a bit of a glow up, pretty limited glow up, but making them those kind of cool, funky spaces, but giving it a kind of modern touch.
Yes.
Whilst honouring kind of some of those kind of old school villas. That's been a very strong kind of property play overseas.
Interesting.
And it's just amazing how a slight repositioning of an old school asset actually can make it relevant once again. And, that's what you're talking about with some of these mum and dad operators or some of these legacy businesses, just giving them that kind of 20% of secret sauce and bringing them to 2025.
Yep, totally agree.
Generate outsized returns.
Yep, I believe so.
Yeah.
So Ryan, rich conversation as I anticipated.
Yeah.
Very grateful for you for coming on the show, and I'm really looking forward to seeing the other show with you on it about the house renovation journey. I'm going to be sitting there with my popcorn going, this is fascinating.
I'm interested to see how it comes out as well.
Yeah.
It's going to be a good watch.
And really appreciate your time today.
You too, Josh.
Thanks, Ryan. If you enjoy these episodes, I hope you do. I love filming them, and the guests always say what a great and often cathartic experience it is for them. Then please do like and share. Hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm open to connect requests, and occasionally get emails from people as well asking me about my experience around certain subjects. So please do like and share and continue to follow the show. I really appreciate your ears.